Hello and welcome, it's Carl. In this video, I'm going to be explaining how you can buy your very first rental property. Now, this is going to be a complete and ultimate guide, and this is a way which you can earn passive income. And you may sit there and ask yourself, well, why would I want to earn passive income? Well, essentially, if you're working a job, your time is your money. And if your time is your money, you're going to be working till the day you die. Now, without sounding somber, if you can go ahead and nail this, then who knows, maybe you'll not have to work for that boss until the day you cop it. I need you guys to stay with me on this one. This is going to be a detailed video, and there are honestly so many golden nuggets of information in this one. We're going to be looking at actual example using actual figures. I'm also going to be showing you how you can actually, as a secret way to even compound or increase the return on your investment properties. And in addition to that, I'm also going to throw in a unique way which one can finance a property without even having to get a loan from a bank. Now, one thing that's very important with all of these is to realize that this video will give you the framework in order to go out there into the real world and buy your property. Now, some of you guys are going to watch this video and go out into the real world and just continue life as usual. But if you want to actually go ahead and make this a thing, I highly recommend you guys take action. And following this, you take the steps to do the research and actually make it a reality. Now, there are quite a few steps. So lastly, I've tried to order these into as logical sequence as possible. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So step one, you need cash. Now, surprise, surprise, yes, everything in this world which we love and adore requires a bit of cash. Now, unless you have $1 million, $2 million sitting around, which most people I don't think have, you're gonna have to go ahead and get cash elsewhere in order to buy this property. Now, probably one of the most common ways is approaching a bank. So just brief overview, how does this look? You're going to go ahead and approach a bank and ask them for a loan. They're going to give you a loan. You're going to buy this house using that loan. Now, what's going to happen is when you have this house, you're going to rent it out to someone. That someone is going to pay you rent on a monthly basis. You're going to take that rent, and with that rent, you're going to use it in order to pay off that loan which the bank got you. Brief overview, back to step one. So you need this cash, right, in order to finance this property. You're going to go ahead and approach a bank. Now, most banks will require a down payment, an upfront payment from you in order to give you that loan facility. And that down payment ranges between 10 to 20%. So $1 million home, you'll need about $100,000 to $200,000 available for the bank for your down payment. Now, here's a secret tip for you guys. The higher your down payment, the less the house will essentially cost you, because the higher down payment, the lower the interest will be every month. And the lower your interest, the lower the cost, and more profit for you, essentially. Now, what happens if you don't even have the necessary funds, the $100,000 or $200,000 that you need for that down payment? Well, save. I know that's probably the most obvious thing, but there are other things that you can go ahead and do, and that is cut down on your costs as much as possible. So whether it be your insurance premiums, to your food, to the fancy restaurants you're going out to, there are always certain areas where you can go ahead and cut down your costs. What I would recommend, if you want to get really technical with this, is go ahead, draft up your incomes and your expenses. Obviously your income is probably going to be a little bit out of your control, but your expenses, go ahead, look at each one of those and ask yourself, is there a way that I can go ahead and learn this? That is the fastest way that you can go ahead and save up enough cash in order to afford that initial down payment. Step two, so obviously you need a loan in order to go ahead and get your first property. Now, all banks, when they give you a loan, they're going to want to go ahead and assess something called your credit score. So what is a credit score, and how does someone get a good one? Because a good credit score will give you favorable rates when you're trying to get your loan from the bank. So a credit score is a numerical expression used to represent the credit worthiness of a person. So the higher this number is, the better. It ranges from 0 to 999. The higher it is, the more credit worthy you are, and the more favorable the terms will be that a bank will grant you. So a minimum credit score of 600 is what is required in order to make an application. But if I'm honest with you, if you want to go ahead and get favorable rates, which you do want, because this is a lot of money, you want to go ahead and get your credit score up to the region of 700 and preferably 750. 750 should be the goal. So how does one even get this figure? This figure represents the credit worthiness of the individual, the riskiness of the individual. The higher the figure, the better, because it tells the bank that, you know what, this person can be trusted. If we go ahead and loan them money, we'll probably get it paid back. So that's why you want to ensure that that figure is as high as possible. So if your credit score is not sitting at 750, what do? Well, you got to pay off your debts, essentially. Well, there are also a ton of videos on YouTube. Please go ahead when you have time, search. There's tons of information out there which tells you how you can go ahead and get a higher credit score. You don't need to go ahead and hire someone for this stuff. This is expensive, and I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone here wants to bootstrap these operations as best as they can. So just use YouTube, tons of information out there. But essentially what you want to do is get your hands on your credit report and go through the errors and try to just pay off those debts. It really is that simple. So something a little bit extra for you. I contacted one of my actuarial friends in the insurance industry and I asked him, what can someone do in order to get a really good credit score? Someone is young and is just starting out, and he gave me the following 3 ways. So first thing you want to do, it's probably the most common way, is get a credit card if you can. When you get a credit card, spend very little on it, something easily affordable, and pay it off within the month. So that way you get a very good credit score. Another thing you can also do in order to get a good credit score easily is, if your parents are currently paying your cell phone contract, maybe just ask their mom and dad, do you mind please letting me pay it? That was another easy way for you to get a good credit score. And lastly, for those of you who go to a lot of big box retailers, get one of those retailers' credit cards and use them for your purchases as you do, and make sure you pay it off within the month, and that way you can again get a very good credit score. So there are 2 things I want you guys to consider before you get your loan, and that is the term. Now, most mortgages, you either want to opt for the 20 or the 30-year option. They both have their pros and their cons. The 20-year option, you'll have higher monthly repayments because you're paying it over a shorter time period, but your interest will be lower. So your total cost for the property after 20 years will be less than a 30-year mortgage. Now, with a 30-year mortgage, your monthly repayments are going to be less than a 20-year mortgage, but your interest rate is going to be higher as there's more risk for the lender. So at the end of 30 years, your price you pay for the property will be much more than the 20-year mortgage. So something for you guys to consider: 30-year mortgage, it's going to, by having the lower monthly repayments, free up more cash or possibly more expenses if you had them over the lifetime of the mortgage. And the 20-year mortgage, on the other hand, although it will have higher repayments, you'll end up saving cash when you consider the total cost of the property. So something else that I want you guys to also consider is the rate. So the interest rate which you get on the mortgage, it can either be fixed or variable. A fixed interest rate is fixed, it doesn't change over the 20 or 30 year lifespan. A variable interest rate will obviously vary depending on the terms of the contract. Both of these have their pros and their cons. Obviously a fixed rate is stable, whereas a variable rate can go up or down, and it may happen that over the course of the mortgage interest rates drop, then you'll benefit if you have a variable rate versus a fixed rate. But me personally, I think having a fixed rate is better. It just provides stability, which is very rare in this day and age. So step number 3, there are a few documents which these loan providers will require when you approach them for a loan. These documents most of the time are your salary and your payslip, your employment contract. They will also ask you for things like 3 or 6 months worth of bank statements, your ID, your marriage certificate, and in addition to that, they may also ask for a statement of your assets, things that you own, and your liabilities, people who you owe money. So just something to consider. So why would you need to provide these to a bank? Well, in order for them to assess how large of a loan you would qualify, they want to know how much you can essentially afford to pay every month. Now, that's why your salary slip and your bank statements are probably the 2 most important documents there for them. What they'll go ahead and do is, when they receive your application, they'll take your salary, and using the bank statements, they'll get a rough idea of your monthly expenses. They'll subtract the 2 from one another, and that way they'll see how much cash you have left over every month in order to pay off that loan. Now, just briefly, if you had person A, let's say they had $100,000 a month salary, I know, ridiculous, and monthly expenses of $30,000. Then you had person B, who also had a salary of $100,000, but have monthly expenses of $95,000, which person do you think they're going to loan more to? Obviously person A, because they have more cash left over at the end of every single month in order to make those monthly loan payments. So step 4, you go ahead and start looking for properties? No. The first thing you got to do is approach your preferred lender of choice, your bank, and provide them with all the documents. Go through the previous step which I mentioned. The reason why you want to do this is you want to get an upfront assessment, and with that assessment you'll then get an idea of what the bank would be willing to loan you. Now, how does this help you? Bearing in mind and knowing what the bank is willing to loan you, you'll be able to go ahead and fine-tune your search for potential rental properties, because knowing how much you can afford, you'll then obviously be able to filter in the websites you look through houses which are within your budget. So what is the benefit of this? Obviously it's just going to save you a lot of time. You won't make the mistake of going to look at a property, you look at it, you like it, you then ask the bank for a loan, and it turns out that you can't afford the loan. So it's just a matter of efficiency. And a tip here, when you do go ahead and approach the lender now, one thing you want to do is just tell them what your credit score is. Don't let them do any inquiries into it, because that can sometimes hamper your credit score. And yes, provide them with all the documents and let them give you a rough idea of how much you can actually afford for a loan. Now, you may ask yourself, how do I get a credit score? I'm going to include a link in the description which will help you guys. There's plenty of websites available which will help you guys in order to get your credit score. So give that a look. Okay, it's bonus time. So in the intro I said that there's one way which you can finance a property without having to use a bank. Sounds very interesting. And this is called seller financing. So in seller financing, you as the buyer of the rental property will approach the seller, and you'll get the seller to actually finance the purchase of that property. How does this work? Well, you guys enter an agreement called a promissory note. In that promissory note, you guys detail the payments that you have to make, the down payment, the monthly payment, and the interest rates. And the beauty of this is that it saves a lot of time. Having to deal with banks, there's a lot of regulation involved, a lot of paperwork, a lot of people, a lot of parties. It's going to take a much longer time in order to get this thing approved. Whereas going through seller financing, you have the benefit of saving a lot of time. But one thing that this is a problem, like anything in this world where there's a pro, there's also going to be a con. The con in this case is that most of the time seller financing does have higher interest rates. So if you're willing to go the longer path of dealing with the bank, you'll get a better interest rate, but it will take more time. Whereas if you're willing to go the seller financing route, you will get the benefit of saving a lot of time. So something to consider, bonus tip for you. So we are on to step number 5. That's the fun time. So go online, look at properties which are within your price range. There are many websites available for this, and snip those properties which you're interested in, put in an Excel spreadsheet, and with that, go ahead and visit these sites. Get an idea of the homes, get an idea of talking with the sellers. It's just a very good experience all in all. Now, we must remember what the goal is. The goal is for us to purchase a property. Now, ideally, we want to get the best bargain we can, right? If we know a house is worth $1 million, but the seller is willing to sell it to us for $800,000, that's a good deal, right? Whereas if we know the house is worth $1 million, but the seller's asking for $1.2 million, then we're going to be overpaying, and that's not something we want. So this experience, this part is crucial. Going out, chatting to the sellers, and just getting a really good feel for the market. So what I recommend at this point I recommend you go out and you at least list about 20 properties which you are interested in looking at. This will be a good starting point, as it will allow you to get your feet wet, and will give you a good idea, like I said, of how much homes are going for in certain areas. Now, the next few steps are very important. I need you guys to pay attention to them. Now, with all of these things like passive income, there is going to be a bit of math involved. So get your glasses on, pull your calculator out, and let's dive in. Okay, so we are at step 6, and what I want you to do is, let's go back to that spreadsheet which you had with all the properties you've listed. And what I want you to do next to each property is go ahead and put there the annual rental, what you think you would receive from renting out that property. And underneath that, I also want you to put the price which you think you can get the house for. And what I then want you to do is I want you next to that just say equals, and I want you to take the annual rental divided by the price which you think you could pay in order to get that house. And what this figure tells us is the return on investment. The higher this figure is, quite simply, the better. Okay, we want to try get per dollar invested into that house as much as we can in terms of rent. We want to try and maximize the rent we are getting per dollar invested into the house, so to say. So the higher this figure, the better. Now, where you're going to get that annual rental figure, go on to Google the same way you did when you were searching properties to buy, and instead this time just search properties to rent and look for properties in the same area, similar size, similar quality in terms of modernness, and that way you can get a very rough idea of what type of rent you could afford. And obviously also you want to combine your knowledge from when you went ahead and actually saw these properties. Obviously this ratio doesn't factor into the equation that the price of the house can increase, but this is passive income. We are interested in the monthly rentals which we are going to be earning. So that's why taking the monthly rentals divided by the price which we think we are going to pay for the house is a very good formula to use in order to assess, in order to compare different properties. So let's just do a very quick easy example for you guys. Let's say we have house A, house B, both are going on the market for $1 million each. House A, we go ahead, we look online and we see that we can get annual rental of about $100,000, whereas when we go ahead and we look at house B and houses in that market, we see that the annual rental which we could get for a similar house is sitting around $60,000. Which is the better house to invest in? Obviously it's going to be house A. So moving on to step 7, cash is king. Now for this you want to use a useful website. It's called mortgagecalculator.org, and in there you can go ahead and plug in a few numbers very easily and get a good idea of what the monthly repayment will be on your loan. So let's go ahead and look at an example so you can see potentially how much you can earn when you go ahead and buy your first rental property. Okay, so let's head over to mortgagecalculator.org. We need to fill in the following information. So obviously we're going to put down the value of the property, $1 million. We are going to be having a down payment of 20%, and then the interest rate, well, that's going to depend on our credit score. So let's just assume for this example that that is 5%, and the term will be 30 years. And the rest of the stuff we can just leave blank. Let's go ahead and calculate that, and we get a monthly repayment of $4,300. Now, in addition to this $4,300, there are also a few other costs which I need you guys to consider. Now, this is a very rough science, but things like expenses, upkeep, as well as vacancy, that's going to cost you a bit of money, as well as insurance. So expenses, they probably sit at about 10% of the monthly rental. Let's just call it $400. Vacancy, there may be a period of time while you own this property that may be left vacant. Let's just keep this at a standard $200 for all properties. And then insurance, let's also keep this at about 10% of the monthly rental. So let's call it again another $400. So in total, when we take the $4,300 that we have to pay monthly to the bank, as well as the $400 for expenses, the $200 for the vacancy costs, and the $400 for insurance, we see that we need to clear $5,300 every month in order to be cash flow positive. Very important, guys. You always want to be cash flow positive. So once we've done a bit of research, we can also see that for this particular property, we'll be able to get rent of roughly $6,500 per month. So $6,500 less the $5,300, that gives us $1,200 per month cash flow positive. That's $1,200 which we get to keep every month. So multiply that by 12, that results in $14,400 every year which we get in cash to keep. And in addition to this, I also don't want you to forget the $11,800 worth of equity which you now have in the property, as you have been paying off this bank loan for the last 12 months of the first year, and that's also something to consider. You now own essentially $11,800 worth of this property that is currently worth $1 million. Now, there may be instances where you do this calc and you realize, you know what, I'm not even breaking even. This thing is not cash flow positive. I'm just going to leave it. But something that you need to keep in the back of your head is that that's not all settled and done. What you can maybe think of is maybe I can get a better price on the house. Maybe I don't need to pay, just for an example, the $1 million he's asking for. Maybe I can get it for $950,000 or $900,000, and plug and play that into the equation and see what you get, and maybe you get a different result. So something to consider. Okay guys, so we are now on to step number 8, and this is something you can do to get a little bit of an extra return in order to boost the income which you plan on getting from your rental property, and that is get a fixer upper. Get something which requires just a little bit of work in order to get a higher return. Now what you find with these fixer uppers is that they usually have a certain problem. They may be a little bit too old, or something may be damaged in the house, and maybe a little bit of a renovation is required. Because of this, you'll normally find that these homes can go for a little bit cheaper than all the other homes on the market. Now what is key here is that you need to be very accurate and reasonable with your costing, because there's no point in buying a fix upper, doing the renovations, and actually realizing, oh snap, I could have just purchased a similar house that didn't require any renovations for a cheaper price. So the costing here will be very, very important, and you would need a reliable contractor who can help you with doing something like this fairly accurately. Okay, so how does one go about finding a contractor? Guys, like anything, head over to Google, type in contractors near me. I highly recommend you use Google reviews in order to get a decent idea on how good they are. But in addition to this, it'll obviously also require just a little bit of experience. You're bound to work through a few of these in your life. But another thing that you can do is just do a little bit more research. So when you reach out to them and they go over to your property, go ahead, ask them some questions, get a good feel for what they're saying and roughly how much they would charge you. These things are honestly just a matter of experience. Another thing you can also do is ask them for proof of their previous work. That can also give you an idea of the quality one can expect from them. Now, another thing you just need to bear in mind whenever it comes to these renovations is, trust me, it will always cost more and it will always take slightly longer than you wish. This is just life, any business in this world. As you guys know, things always take slightly longer, probably cost a little bit more. So when you do budget for your renovations, when you do look at this house and you want to factor in the cost it will take to fix it up, I want you to take that price and increase it by between 10 to 20%. Because yes, the real world, things never really always go to plan. Now guys, just a few other tips when it comes to renovating a fixer upper. You want to choose materials that are durable. Unfortunately in this world, when you're renting out to someone, they're not going to treat it like their own unless you are very lucky and you have a very nice tenant. So you want to make sure you build the house with durable, long-lasting materials. You want to stay away from carpet, preferably, and you want to look at things like bricks, concrete, tiles, laminate. That type of stuff lasts much longer. And the last tip for you guys over here is you want to make sure that you're on site while the contractor is performing these renovations. The reason why you want to do this is it'll ensure that, first of all, you can hold the contractor accountable. If he knows you're rocking up, he's going to rock up. And also you can just ensure that the renovations are done to your liking. Okay, so we are now at step number 10. And this is going to be a little bit fun, a little bit exciting, a little bit nerve-wracking. But for step number 10, what you're going to do now that you have your properties which you're interested in listed in your Excel spreadsheet, you're going to go ahead and call up the sellers and make potential offers. Now, you can expect to be shot down. It's only natural that this is going to happen. You're not going to succeed with every offer you make, but develop a little bit of a hard skin. I recommend getting some experience, and sooner or later this will be like just talking to one of your friends. But it's a lot of fun, so now's the time to get that phone and start dialing. Now, another secret tip I have for you guys when you are doing this process is, if you want to get the best opportunities, the best investments, it's always going to be a numbers game. So there are thousands of properties out there, and naturally the more properties which you look at for sale, the higher likelihood you are going to find of finding the best or better opportunities. So quite simply, the more properties you look at, the better opportunities you're going to find. So when it comes to dealing with realtors now, because remember, you're going to be buying from sellers, and remember, you also are going to be renting out your house eventually to tenants. But In this process, you're going to be dealing with realtors, and this is just a common sense thing, but you want to make sure that when you're dealing with realtors, whether it be buying from a seller or renting out to a tenant, you want to make sure that you align yourself with a realtor who's trustworthy and, most importantly, punctual. This day and age, time is money, and you want to make sure that no time is being wasted, and you just want to work with someone essentially who's very efficient. So something to consider for step 11. Okay, so we are now at step 12, and for step 12, when you have made an offer and the seller is interested in it and you've contacted the realtor, what you're going to want to do is inspect the property. Now, when it comes to inspections, obviously you want to look at a few main things, those main things being the electrical works, the plumbing infrastructure, whether there's any mold in the house, and you also want to check the roof. Just general things. You just want to make sure that there's no damage. If you do find that there is a problem with one of these, go ahead and use it, leverage it, and say to the buyer, listen, I notice there's a problem here, can I get a price reduction? There's honestly no harm in asking, and it just helps to increase your return slightly more. Okay, so we are now on to step number 13. You've done the inspections, you're happy with what you see, and you can go ahead and enter into the agreement to purchase the property. Now, once you've gone ahead and purchased the property, it is time to list it for sale on one of the many websites available. Now, when it comes to listing a property for sale, one thing you guys need to invest in is product photography. We live in a very visual day and age. When you're looking for homes to buy or to rent online, the visual appeal of properties will play a huge factor in determining if someone even clicks on your listing. So I highly recommend, when it comes to listing your property, that you invest in some good quality photos. Now, when your property is listed on these websites, you're going to get clients sending you lots of messages. Please make sure that you respond to those messages as soon as possible. This will tell the client quite simply that you are someone who is good and easy to work with, and it will just help with doing business with them in the future. Okay, so for step number 14, when it comes to listing your property and finding a tenant, this once again is quite similar to one of those previous steps where I mentioned that if you want to find as many opportunities as possible, it's just going to be a numbers game. And when it comes to listing your property, it's very similar in the sense of it's also just a numbers game. You want to go ahead and list your property on as many websites as possible. Now, I don't recommend obviously that you literally list it on every single website in the world, but I think try find within the region of between 5 to 10 websites. That'll really give you and your property great exposure, and it'll help you to find a tenant as soon as possible and minimize the vacancy period. Okay, and we are down to the last step, step number 15. And step number 15 is a short one. It is quite simply rinse and repeat this process. That way one can build up passive income in the real estate industry. And yeah, once you've done this once, I promise you it'll get easier the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth time. So that marks the end of this video. I know it was jam-packed with a lot of information, but I think it's necessary to provide this information so that when you guys go out there into the real world, you guys know exactly what you are doing. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in the next one.